Hi, I'm Christine Richards and I'm a full-time resin artist from Cornwall. I'm going to be your tutor to create 2 pieces of coastal themed resin art. So let's dive right in and start making waves. This Clearly Creative kit contains everything you'll need and I'll show you how to create 2 completely different looks. So first off, I'll show you how to create one of these beautiful oceanscapes. This effect is created with a 2-step process. Firstly, we pour the deep bluey green ocean and then allow that to cure, before layering clear and white resin on top to create these intricate lacy waves. So the edges of a board are taped, so let's begin by mixing up the resin for our ocean. Start by weighing out 100 grams of resin and 50 grams of hardener to give us a total of 150 grams of resin. When mixing resin, it's a really good idea to use a timer and follow the double potting technique. This means that you start by mixing in one pot and set a timer for 3 minutes. Mix steadily and thoroughly for the full 3 minutes, making sure that you scrape the sides and the bottom of the cup every so often. I'm going to separate this resin now into these 3 cups. We're going to be starting off darker in these ones and then diluting it more with clear resin as we work our way down the board. We're going to be adding some metallic pigment to this pot, maybe a bit of colour as well, which will be great for adding some sparkle to the piece. We'll start by sharing about half of our clear resin evenly between these 3 cups. Be sure to give these pigments a good shake before you use them. The first colour is a blend of about 10 or so drops of topaz green, and then about 3 or 4 drops of indigo blue. These pigments are really concentrated, so be careful not to add too much. This will be the second of my 3 colours, which will be just pure indigo blue. I'll start by adding a few drops of the pigment. Then I'll test the intensity on the side of the cup. This needs to be a little darker, so I'll just add a few more drops. Yes, I'm happy with that. The last colour will add the sparkle depth. It's made using a small scoop of Arctic Pearl shimmer powder, and then just a couple of drops of the topaz green pigment. With all these colours, keep mixing until you have a single uniform colour. Now it's time for the best part, creating the artwork. I'm going to start with our darker bluey green colour, pour it in waves instead of straight lines. Don't pour all of this shade onto your board. Remember, we'll be diluting this mix down to create our lighter shades. We can then spread it round to the edges using the stick. I'm going to head in with the dark blue. So I've just left a little gap, which when the resin starts to level and space out, it's leaving clear gaps. It will just, as it goes in, it will just create different effects. Some of these, like on the edges, I'm just going to spread out. Spreading out here just loosely on the board. When we go and pour the lighter colours as well, you'll see the pigment will stick to the board slightly, so you'll see these marks underneath the resin as well. So I'm just blending these colours in together slightly. So now I'm going to start creating the lighter shades by diluting down my green and blue pots. Don't use all of our resin now because down the line we might want to create further lighter shades. So I'm just mixing in this diluted green. I like to not fully mix and leave it a bit swirly in there because it can come out at the end, giving a bit of a seaweed effect in the ocean. So when I pour, I like to cross over the layers as well. It just adds depth to the piece and the ocean. Right, now for our blue. And little drops are fine because they are details. So here now where the 2 colours are starting to blend together, it's starting to create that really cool sort of under the ocean effect. I'm now going to tilt the board. Now we're part way through putting the colour on. Tilting it down will make the resin run slightly, and because it's transparent it will create a fluid movement effect throughout the water. Now we're heading down to the lighter end of the colours. I'm just going to dilute this blue down a little bit further. I'm just going to spread it around, let it gently blend into the darker colour. I'm leaving this end slightly clear because this is where on the next layer I'll be pouring the white wave over. So it's just a slightly simpler background for that to fall on. So now I'm just going to do my favourite bit, which is adding a little bit of shimmer. So I'm just going to have a little look, choose where I'd like it to go, see where it will be the best effect. Another slight tilt will help all the shades flow naturally into each other. Okay, so now all the colours are down and the board's covered. We're going to get the hairdryer out and really utilise the resin's fluid movement to get that ocean effect. Okay, so the first layer is down and done. I'm super excited with how it's looking. We're just going to leave this secure for at least 5 hours before moving on to the next layer. Now it's time for my favourite part, making waves. For this we'll be mixing up 75 grams of resin, pouring most of this clear and saving a small amount for the white. Once again, follow the correct mixing procedure. Awesome, it's now time to start making our waves. So I'm just going to start by pouring it slightly in from the edge, and then I'll be spreading it out with a little stick just so we get a nice coverage. I'm probably going to come about just over half of the way down and do like a little wave motion. Remember, when we're doing this, we just need to leave a small amount at the end to mix our white in. Just even this out. Don't worry about spreading the resin perfectly level. The resin will level out all by itself. As you can see, we're not saving much resin for the white, it will only need a little bit to do a line. With the white, you'll need to use slightly more than you do when mixing your colours for like the ocean. It'll just give it a nice bold wave. So now my white's mixed, I'm just going to follow the wavy line I've made with the clear coat along there with this. Okay, so now it's time to use the hairdryer and bring these waves to life. You can see how quickly the hairdryer wisps the white and clear resin to complete this realistic wave effect. Ta-da! So now as our piece is curing, you'll see the effects in the white continue to develop, creating this really nice lacing effect, and we're now going to cover it up and leave it for 24 hours. Okay, so now we're going to be creating a really fun mixed media beach scene. With this project, we're going to be incorporating sand and shells. This technique is a two-part process. First, we're going to mix up some resin with the sand to create our beach. Then we'll be creating our ocean colours and bringing that down to the sand. Also, at this stage, we're going to be adding our shells to build up our beach scene. Once all that's cured, we'll be moving on to our final stage of adding in the waves. Once again, I've pre-taped my board, so it's now time to mix the resin. I'll be mixing up a 75 gram mix using 50 grams of resin and 25 of hardener. As always, mix steadily and thoroughly for the full 3 minutes, making sure that you scrape the sides and the bottom of the cup every so often. For 75 grams of resin, I find adding 50 grams of sand makes a really good consistency. So now my sand's all mixed together to the ratio I wanted, I can now just start to pour it down the bottom where I want my beach to be. So I might just make it in some waves as well before I spread it out, just to give it that effect. And then just going to spread it around a bit. The sand's in place, it's now time to mix up the resin for the ocean. Mix up a 120 gram batch of clear resin. For this we'll use 80 grams of resin and 40 grams of hardener. As always, follow the mixing process described in the introduction. Similar to the last project, we're going to start off with the darker shade, but this time we're going to use the blue. Then we'll be diluting it to create lighter shades as we work down the board. I'll just pour about half of the clear resin into this cup to create this darker shade, saving the other half of the resin for diluting. Now pour half of this dark shade onto the board, saving the rest to dilute for our next lighter shade. When I mix the lighter shades, I don't like to completely mix the clear and shade. I find this gives me subtle, dense streaks that add to the realism of the ocean. Again, pour about half and dilute again. You can see that the more you dilute, the more intense the streaks get. Just before I add the final and lightest blue shade, I'm just going to blend that one on the board. I like to get my hands dirty at this point, and using your mixing stick will blend the resin just as well. A slight tilt just gets the different shades to naturally flow into each other. To help create more depth over the sand, I find that running a thin bead of clear resin is really effective. Okay, so let's use the rest of the clear resin and dilute what's left in the blue pot. Pour nearly all of this onto your board, saving a very small amount for our final detailing, and blend it all together, making wavy shapes. For the final detailing, I'll mix in some of the shimmer powder in the kit to create a beautifully bluey pearl colour. As you can see, we don't need much resin for this final shade in this stage. Starting off your board, pour thin streaks across your piece in a wavy pattern. So now it's time to add the shells. Just pick which ones you like. So let's start with this one. Gently press down. Give it a little wiggle in the resin so it gives it a little bit of a hook for when it cures, and then continue selecting them. So that's stage one of our beachscape complete. We'll leave this to cure for at least 5 hours. Just keep an eye on it while it does, because some bubbles may appear around the shells. If they do, just pop them with a cocktail stick. Now it's time to make waves on our beach scene. The same as last time, we'll be mixing 75 grams of resin. We'll pour most of it clear, saving a small amount which will pigment white. As always, follow the correct steps when mixing this batch of resin. So the same as last time, we're just going to start by pouring our clear resin. Again, I'm going to do it to about halfway down, and remembering to save a little bit for our white. I'm just going to follow the wavy line of our sand, so when we come to finish it off, it will all fall nicely. I'm just going to now spread out our clear, again following our little beach. Again, I'm just added in quite a lot of the white pigment. It'll just give those waves that nice solid look. Now that's mixed, I'm just going to pour the white along the line of the clear resin. Now it's time to get the hairdryer out on our beach scene and create the waves. So now we've blown the waves back, I'm just going to give it a little tilt so the white and the waves just wash over the sand a little bit more. We're now going to leave our beach scene to cure for 24 hours. We'll check back in an hour or two just in case there's any bubbles. If there are any bubbles, we'll pop them with a cocktail stick. The pieces are now cured and I'm super happy with the results. I love how differently they have each turned out. It just shows the freedom you have with this kit. I'm over the moon with this beautiful beach scene. The texture of the sand and the shells really bring it to life. By diluting the blue throughout, it's created a really realistic effect. So all that's left to do is remove the tape, display your art and admire your sea view. I hope you enjoyed the projects in this tutorial. We can't wait to see your own creations, so don't forget to submit them to our Glasscast gallery page on the Glasscast Resin website and tag us on your social media posts. If you've enjoyed the process and want to go further, you'll find the Glasscast 3 resin along with a huge range of pigments, effects and accessories on the Glasscast Resin website. Or why not try one of the other Clearly Creative kits and learn a completely new resin technique? Thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial.